joining me for this session of Introduction to Model UN for Beginners. Today we're going to be covering just the basics, what you're going to want to know when you enter the committee room for the first time, how you're going to want to present yourself, interact with the delegates, and even before you enter the room, how you want to prepare yourself to jump into the middle of this. Some of you may have never stepped into a committee room before, and some of you may be very familiar with it. So it is my hope that I will be able to answer any questions that you might have, and at the same time really focus on the skills that I think will make you a successful candidate at HMUN 2017. Just a few things to note before we begin. This is just good practice. Remember to thoroughly read your background guide before you do anything else. You need to know coming in what your director wants you to focus on and how you can best accomplish that. And reading this background guide will give you the best ability to do that. I will speak a little bit more about that later when I go into preparation. And remember that you can also contact your directors at any time with any questions that you might have. So with that, I want to begin with just preparation for a Model UN conference. Just off the bat, the most informed person in the room is going to be the most successful person in the room. So this starts off at the very beginning with just a lot of reading. Know your topic. Know what you're getting into. You can't read the introduction and conclusion on the background guide and assume that you're going to be able to grasp what's going on. The topics that we select, that our directors select, are supposed to be very difficult. They're supposed to be nuanced and challenging. There's a reason that these problems haven't been solved before. There are no easy answers. And the more you read and prepare ahead of time, the more successful you're going to be. Also, again, ahead of time, practice how you want to convey yourself. Practice speaking in public. You can speak in front of a mirror if you want, but generally the most effective thing to do is just to really get out there and practice. This could be if you volunteer at a charity or institution and you teach a group of younger students a lesson, a math lesson, or just tutoring in general. This can be grabbing a friend and having them videotape you as you give a short prepared speech, and then looking at that videotape later and analyzing yourself and seeing how you come off. Do you have nervous tics? Do you talk too fast? Does your head shake uncontrollably? Things like that are going to distract from the quality of your speech when you want to give it. So again, start with the reading. Know your topic. Second, learn how to present yourself. Know how you're going to be speaking to other people and know how you're going to come off. And the third thing that you should focus on is, this sounds small, but be comfortable going into committee. Wear something that you're comfortable in. Wear something that fits you well, that you can talk and move around with for 4 hours. Ladies, if you are wearing very, very high heels, you may have a problem focusing on what you're doing. If you're wearing something that's too hot for the room or something that you don't feel good in, that's going to come out in how you speak and how you convey yourself. So, again, all of this needs to happen before you even enter the committee room. Now, some of you come from backgrounds in which your schools or your Model UN groups really support you very well. And some of you, you're coming in by yourself for the first time and you don't really have support. Take advantage of whatever you have. So if you are from a school that does a lot of Model UN, then talk to people who have done 2, 3, 4, 30 conferences. Speak to them because they know what they're going to encounter when they come into a committee room, and they can give you all those hard-fought tricks and tips that they've learned over a very, very long period of time. If not, however, and if you're more on your own, that's what the internet's for, and you can really look at what other people are doing. You can use YouTube, you can look at our own resources and our own preparation materials on the HMN India page and really prepare yourself to encounter something that's vastly perhaps different than anything you've ever done before. The second thing I'd like to cover today is the rules of procedure. Now, I know that 2 other directors will have covered these for you and that they will have gone into detail on all the nuances of the rules of procedure. But I just wanted to hit a few very useful tips when you're starting off. If you know the rules of procedure well, parliamentary procedure, Parley Pro, they're called different things, you can own the room. Here's the 5-minute rundown. What's going to happen is you're all going to enter the room on the first day. There's some free time. You should be there well in advance of committee starting. Make sure you can find your room. But there should be some free time right at the beginning where you can just kind of get yourself set. You should walk into the room, set your things down, and go mingle with other people. And just try to connect with people first on kind of a very unforced level. But then the next thing that is going to happen is committee is going to start. And in that instance, the people that know the rules of procedure are going to be more successful than other people, no matter how charismatic those other people are. So the very first thing that will happen in a committee is that your director will probably stand up, speak to you a little bit. They'll introduce themselves. Your assistant directors, the rest of the dais, will introduce themselves as well. At that point, someone will make the motion to open debate. Now, if you are at a conference in which there is more than one topic to be debated, you'll have to set the agenda to whatever topic that is. At HMN India, they're all single topics, I believe. So you'll need to, that'll be set automatically. Your chair will likely note that, and then someone will need to motion to open the speakers list. What the speakers list is just a very formal way of speaking. You raise your placard, you get added to the list, we go straight down the list, and you go up to the front of the room, speak in the microphone for whatever period of time is set. Now, usually the speakers list is used most heavily at the beginning of the committee. Shortly, your committee director will probably ask for any other motions or points on the floor. At that point, you are free to raise your placard and suggest any type of moderated caucus that you're interested in. When you ask to do a moderated caucus, you motion for the moderated caucus itself on whatever topic you want to set it for. Then you have to set a amount of time, so for example 20 minutes, with a speaking time of 1 minute per person. And maybe 3 or 4 people in the room will suggest a moderated caucus, and your room will vote on it, and then you'll move into that caucus. Again, if you want a more formal, in detail look at the rules of procedure, I encourage you to peruse the other webinars that are located on this site. I believe Aisha already did one, and I think that there's another forthcoming one in a few days. So really, I encourage you to look at those and understand what the rules of procedure are, because particularly as a new delegate, the purpose of this webinar is for you new delegates. That is what's really going to elevate your game, and it's what's going to put you on par with people who have been doing this for a much, much longer period of time. So it's now the day of the committee, and you have prepared. You know your rules of procedure because you've studied them, and you haven't just assumed that HMN's rules of procedure are the rules of procedure that you've followed before. You have looked at HMN's specifically and noted any differences between what you've been told by other people or what you might be used to. At that point, so you know rules of procedure, and you've prepared. You've read your background guide thoroughly because, again, and I'm recapping here, your background guide tells you what you need to focus on. It will tell you how your director approaches the topic, what needs to be brought up in committee, and what your director will absolutely mandate be included in any type of draft resolution. Now, using the background guide itself is an extremely useful tool. So you can look into, for example, questions a resolution must answer. That'll be located towards the end of every guide except for possibly the crisis committees. With those, it will literally tell you what your director thinks you should focus your time on. It will tell you that they will not accept a paper that does not have a certain bit of information. Use that. That the guide should not only tell you information about your topic, but should tell you information about how the committee itself will run. Look at your introduction. Look at your conclusion. Is there something that your director tells you to focus on or not to focus on? Really read between the lines of what they're saying. And then use that as a jumping off point to really dive deep into committee and to figure out what's going on. So you know the rules of procedure, and you've prepared, you've done all your research in advance, and now you're stepping into the room. Now, there are a number of ways that I could talk about how you're working in committee, but first I want to talk about kind of some main principles. First, you're always writing. Learn how to write with one hand and have your placard in the air with your other hand, ready to be called on in a moderated caucus, ready to speak. You should always be multitasking in the committee. Sometimes you're just going to be tired and you're not going to be able to focus on everything at once, and then that's okay. You can back off a little bit, and you'll kind of find your own style. But generally, the most successful delegates are the ones who are constantly writing and constantly prepared to speak. You could be writing notes on what someone else is discussing. You could be writing down your own arguments so that if you're called to speak on out of the blue and you don't have anything prepared, you can look down, see the notes that you've written for yourself, and go from there. You can be writing the intro to a draft resolution, or if you're in a smaller crisis committee, you can be writing any directive as you're prepared to speak. So you're constantly writing, you're constantly noting things down. You might be writing notes to other delegates. One thing you should not be doing is writing a lot of notes to the dais. A lot of delegates think that the way to stand out is to just write a whole bunch of letters to the director or the assistant directors and just get their name up there a lot. Our directors are very, very trained, and they've done Model UN for a really long time. They're going to know when you're just trying to flood the dais with your name, and they're not going to respect that. They're going to respect those delegates who are out there doing their jobs, performing to the best of their ability, talking with other students, really trying to make blocks, trying to make compromises, and coming up with brand new ideas and showing the depths of their research. They're not going to give you a higher position just because you sent a whole bunch of notes to the dais. So we've covered that you're always writing something, your placard is up, and you're ready to speak. Now, what does ready to speak mean? It doesn't mean that you have everything prepared in front of you. Each person has a different style of speaking. Some people are better prepared off the cuff, and those people can stand up at any time and just rattle something off and they're content. But generally, it's better to give a little thought to your speech. Again, you can write something down, take some notes, have an argument against what one person said or an argument in support of what another person said. Some people want to write things out a little bit more detailed. You can do little bullet points and kind of glance down if you get stuck. Depending on your level of comfort with debate and the English language, you may need to write more of it out, and you may need to be a little bit more deliberate than I'm suggesting here. And in that case, you got to do what works for you. You need to understand yourself, understand your own strengths, and move from there. Another thing that's very important is working with others and establishing very congenial, which means friendly, and respectful relationships with other people. Unfortunately, Model UN can sometimes turn into a lot of people yelling different things at each other. And when someone's yelling at you, you don't want to work with them. It's very clear that someone who is yelling at you has no respect for you. No one wants to work with someone who has no respect for them. So one of the probably most important things is making those relationships with other people and setting them off from the beginning, establishing that you are friendly, that you are easygoing, that you are good to work with, that you're willing to compromise, and that most of all you have respect for others, that you are willing to see their point of view, that you value the time and effort that they put into their research, that you acknowledge their good points, and that you very tactfully call them out if they've done something wrong. Now, one thing at HMUN India in particular is it is inappropriate to use a point of personal privilege, a point of procedure, whatever it be, to call someone out for being wrong. It is also inappropriate to send a message to the chair telling the chair that someone else did something wrong. If someone is factually incorrect, you may bring that up in a speech, your speech, when it is your time to speak. It is not appropriate to use the point, and it is not appropriate to send a letter to the dais. That has occurred before, and we need to establish that that is not how HMUN is run. The reason is, if you're going through the dais, you are not working directly with that person. You are straining the relationship between them, and you're making it very difficult for you to work with that person and for them to work with you, frankly. So make sure you're working with people and not against people. This is not a debate in a very fierce sense of the word. This is about coming together. This is about compromise. This is about fulfilling the mandate of the United Nations itself, which is to bring countries together to form a consensus. This is not cutthroat. This is you working together. That's probably the most important thing that sometimes new delegates don't realize, because they see other old delegates being very cutthroat. But the most successful delegates are going to be the delegates who know how to work together with other people. One more important thing that I would say is critical to how you're acting in committee, and then I'll recap just in a brief note everything I said about what you're doing when you're in committee, is injecting new or timely ideas into conversation. It's very clear, again, who has done their research, because they have new ideas, and they know the flaws, and they know the positive benefits of different ideas. So when someone comes up and isn't prepared to speak and hasn't done a lot of research, they're going to parrot or repeat the ideas that everyone else has already said. When someone else comes to the front of the room and says something brand new, they have a new idea or they have a new outlook on something, that's what's going to draw attention. That's what's going to make your chair notice you. That's what's going to make other delegates notice you and want to work with you, because you have new ideas, because you have a unique outlook on what's happening. Now, what do I mean by that? It could be a new technology that you're bringing into the conversation. But more importantly, it can be a new consideration. For example, say that there is a new technology and it has been very, very successful on a small scale. And so the committee wants to implement it across an entire continent. You can bring up that maybe different countries across that continent are at different levels of economic growth and development, and so that technology may not be applicable in half of those countries. You can bring up very simple logical ideas, things that you're realizing as you're listening to others and as you're participating in this debate, and just bring them up. Don't beat a dead horse. When a point has been made, let it lie. Come up with new ideas. Say new things. Now, to recap, what are you doing in committee? You're writing. Your placard is up and you're ready to speak. You're not going through the dais to achieve success and writing a lot of notes. You're going through the committee. You're going through the channels itself. You are working with others. You are engaging in lively debate with each other. You are participating in unmods. You are listening. You have to listen. You cannot be someone yelling, because then no one is going to be listening to you. So you're compromising with people. And finally, you're injecting those new ideas into the conversation. Now, once you've looked into all of those, you can kind of take this is maybe the first day you're getting familiar, you're getting confident with it. But after maybe you've done a few committee sessions, or after you've done a few conferences in general, there's a steep learning curve, and MUN is very difficult. You can start to very much strategize what you're doing. So there are a number of different ways to approach a committee in general. One is very reactive. So you can look at where the committee is going and you can respond to that. This has a lot of benefits. You're always dealing with what the rest of the committee thinks is interesting and timely and relevant. You're responding to where debate is at the current moment. And you're very much focused in the moment. So you can listen to something and respond to it. And for many, many people, that is where they stay in Model UN. But on the other hand, that is a little bit, to some extent, that is letting other people direct where you're going. That is letting other people direct your agenda. Another way to look at it is in a more long-term strategy. So coming in on Thursday, you're thinking, what do I want to accomplish in the long term? Maybe you want to implement a certain new idea or a certain framework. And so you lay the groundwork for that in your first committee. You have a long arc, you have a long plan to implement, and you are trying to lead committee instead of just responding to how others are leading committee. You know what your end game is, you know what your goals are, and you're willing to accomplish those. This is harder. This is a lot harder to do, and for that reason, a lot of people don't do it because not a lot of people can do it successfully. And it requires a lot of nuance. If no one likes your idea, and if it's very clear that the rest of committee is not going in the direction you plan, then you're going to need to change tactics. And it's simply just not going to work to do your original plan. You're going to need to be flexible in that way. You can also go for kind of a more people-focused strategy, where you are just mostly focused on getting people together in a block based on common goals, maybe even to some extent shifting your goals to work with them, and compromising and working from there. So the first one that I laid out is a very reactive approach to conference. The second idea that I laid out is a very long-term kind of arcing end game approach to conference. And then the third one is more of a people-focused. You can embrace all of those ideas. You can embrace a different idea, but know when you're coming into committee kind of what your style is and how you want to listen to others, how you want to approach others, and where you're going to go in terms of strategy. One thing I definitely want to be very clear about is that plagiarism in any way will not help you get ahead. Now, plagiarism is understood very, very differently by many people, but that is not because plagiarism is a shifting standard. Plagiarism is very, very set, and it's very clear. It's just very much misunderstood. So plagiarism is taking anyone else's ideas or information or research and passing it off as your own. It's plagiarism if your friend writes something for you. It's plagiarism if you take ideas from another delegate without their permission. It's plagiarism if you take ideas from something online and write it down word for word and don't say your source. Even if you say your source and it's word for word and it doesn't have quotation marks, it's still plagiarism. You have to put something into your own words and then you have to cite it. So we have to know that still you read the information, you understood it, you wrote it down, and then we know where you got the information from in the first place. Sometimes coming in as a new delegate, it can be very tempting to resort to plagiarism because you don't know a lot of what's going on. Or maybe this is your first time, or you wanted to focus on something else, or you realize you didn't research enough, and so you're really desperate and you're going for a lot of information really fast. Plagiarism will never pay off. For one thing, the directors can recognize it. We are pretty good at this point in time at recognizing plagiarism, and we will call you out for it, and we will. And at HMUN, plagiarism can get you disqualified for awards, we take it very, very, very seriously. You need to be honest about the work that is yours. So no matter how tempting someone is, even if it seems like the older, successful delegates who have done this more resort to plagiarism, you shouldn't. Have integrity and cite your sources and put your ideas into your own words. Give credit where credit is due, and move from there. And also at this point, do feel free to throw any questions into the chat box. I'm happy to answer anything. There really is no such thing as a stupid question. I'm more than happy to address any questions you might have. Now I want to move on to the personal qualities. A lot of what I've focused on, whether it be preparation or what you're actively doing in committee, is very much in the moment. It's very much material. It's very much process. But you also need soft skills to be successful at Model UN. There's the basics, speaking well, as we've said, writing, working very, very hard. But there's also some kind of personal qualities that the best delegates have. One of them is that people are willing to take risks. What does it mean to take a risk? It means putting in those new ideas, new ideas that maybe no one else has thought of, and maybe ideas that don't have support, but also being flexible and knowing when to take something in a different direction, or when something isn't being well received anymore. When an idea has kind of hit its end, knowing that, okay, it's done, I need to find something new. So you're risk-taking, but you're paying attention to what's going on, and you're being flexible. You're responding to what other people are saying and thinking and planning. Another very important thing is bouncing back. So kind of for a personal story, in my very first committee, I took the advice of my head delegate, and I raised my hand immediately when they opened the speakers list. And so in my very, very first committee, I was picked to give the very, very first speech. I had never stepped foot in a Model UN committee. I had no idea what was going on, and I was giving the first speech. It wasn't what I expected at all. And so going into committee, know that you're going to be taken by surprise by a lot of different things. Even if you've done it for 2-3 years, you're often still taken by surprise at different times with what's going on. Maybe your director doesn't have the same style you thought. Maybe a country that you thought you'd work well with absolutely refuses to speak with you. Maybe you are in a double topic committee, a 2-topic committee, and the delegates picked the other topic, not the topic that you thought was going to be selected. So whatever you do, know that it's not going to be what you expected. And bouncing back from failures, bouncing back from surprise, and just keeping your head straight is going to be extremely useful for you. So maybe you gave a bad speech. That's okay. Figure out what you did wrong. Figure out what you need to change it, and give another speech. Pick yourself back up. If you need to change your strategy, change your strategy. If you feel bad because you feel like maybe you embarrassed yourself or you said something wrong, bounce back, because the measure of your success as an individual is going to be how you respond to a mistake, how you respond when your original plans didn't go like you wanted them to. So maybe out of everything, I think your ability to just keep going, to just persevere and work as hard as you can, no matter what happens, is going to be your most effective tool as a delegate in general. Thirdly, and we've touched briefly on this, is your ability to multitask, to look at a lot of different pieces of information and synthesize those, put them all together, be writing, be listening, be speaking, be writing notes to other people, and doing it all at once. And the fourth thing is energy, that you have a lot of energy. Everyone comes in on the first night of conference with a lot of energy. You're excited, you're just meeting all these different people, and then committee sessions start to get really long, and you're not sleeping enough. and now you're 3 hours into a committee session and you just don't have any more energy. Stand up, shake yourself out, go for a walk around the room, and remember why you're here. Remember, this is a unique opportunity. This is your chance to talk to other people, to really learn perspective, to take things home, and to take home new information that you never would have encountered any other way. So keep your energy high. Again, it's very easy to be high energy in the first 15 minutes. It's a lot harder to be high energy in the last 15 minutes. But sometimes that can be the most important time to have that energy and to have that perseverance and to be working really, really, really hard. So there's a question here, what kinds of things to talk about during a speech? So a lot of that depends on the kind of speech that you're giving, and where you are in the debate and kind of your own personal style. One thing to keep in note, sorry about moving the screen, is that the speakers list is a lot more formal. So at the beginning of debate, when you have that formal speakers list, you may already know that you are number 19, country number 19, and to speak, and they're currently on speaker number 3. Well, this gives you time to prepare. This gives you time to really think about the most important things to cover in your speech. It gives you time to think about what policies you want to advocate for. If you want to point out a factual error that the committee as a whole is not seeing, you can really think it through, and that's where you should be a lot more formal. Dear delegates, the Republic of whatever believes X, Y, and Z, and is really, really, and to be really, really focused and to just nail down what you're going to say in advance. But for a moderated caucus, you're going to be a lot more informal. Why? You simply don't have the time. You have less time to speak, and you have less time to prepare. So it needs to be a lot faster. You need to be a lot more succinct. You need to be addressing what you care about and why. Remember, your goal is always to be driving the committee forward, what we need to focus on. You should be pointing out where more attention needs to be devoted and developed to. You need to be pointing out where flaws are. Maybe there's something that no one has addressed yet. Point that out and speak about it and address it as you go forward. As for what kinds of things to talk about in the speech, make sure you're always on topic in general. So what is your committee mandate? What do you, as a committee, as an institution, have the power to discuss? And what has your director told you to discuss? So make sure that you are also following along with with kind of where those both meet. And make sure you're representing your own country well. Model UN is a really unique opportunity to think about how your own ideas do or don't align with the country that you've been given. And you can really take advantage of that. You can look at, maybe you very much approve of democracy and you're in a non-democratic country. How can you put those together? How can you acknowledge the weaknesses of democracy because you're representing a country that doesn't like democracy, where at the same time basing your knowledge about how to speak with other people and how to interact with other countries on what you know. So how can you kind of put both together? How can you compromise even within yourself as you're going forward? So those are the kind of things that you will definitely want to be talking about as you go forward. So at this point, I've covered most of the main things that I believe are very critical for new delegates to consider when they're going into committee. It's a function of hard skills, so what you're actively doing, and it's a function of soft skills, how you have your personal qualities and how you're moving forward, how you're working with other people at all times. Again, what to take out of this is know the rules of procedure, know your hard skills, and know how to bounce back, know how to take risks, know how to move forward from past mistakes. Definitely reach out if you are interested. You can ask your committee directors or other delegates or your faculty advisor for feedback. But don't rely too heavily on them, because everyone else is going to have an agenda. Everyone else has an opinion. Even the way I'm speaking in this is my opinion on Model UN. And what we know from our experience in Model UN is that everyone has a very different opinion, and that putting together all these opinions is what makes the mandate of the United Nations itself so important, and what makes our job here so important. That we're a forum to think about different things in different ways, to interact with each other, to talk about how we really don't see the world in the same way, and through all these different ideas and through all this diversity, we can come up with a way to move forward and to be successful. So maybe I've said you should be speaking a lot, and maybe you're just not comfortable with that. That's okay. Set goals for yourself. So I say you need to speak a lot. You realize that you don't want to speak a lot. Not in your first committee. You're too nervous. That's fine. Set yourself a goal. Say, I will raise my placard and be on the speakers list, and then when I finish speaking, I will send a note to the dais asking to be added to the speakers list again. And my turn to speak may not come up until the next session, but that's okay, because I've spoken once each session, or twice each session. Or maybe you're in an unmoderated caucus and you just don't feel comfortable breaking into a new group. Maybe challenge yourself to step up confidently into a new group just for a few minutes towards the end of an unmoderated caucus. Or maybe challenge yourself to write 2 notes to another country. Or challenge yourself to write a clause as you're coming in, maybe in the second committee session, and just to add that. So it's about little steps. Model UN can seem very intense, especially to someone coming in for the first time, but it's a lot about what you make it. So you can choose to learn a lot from it, or you can choose to be so afraid of making mistakes that you don't learn a lot at all. This is an opportunity, especially in your first committee, to really be yourself, to be authentic, to look at other people from the outside looking in, and to see what they do that you really like and admire, and what you really don't like and what you don't want to do. And then, because you're always writing, right? You're always writing in committee, take notes on how you want to be, on the type of delegate that you want to be, on the way you want to present yourself to other people, on the errors that you see other delegates making. And then someday, maybe you've left Model UN far behind, you've graduated from high school, you've even graduated from college, and you need to make a presentation in front of your company. You know how to speak now. You have that confidence behind you. You have the ability to bounce back if you make a mistake. And so really what you're doing, if I may suggest this is my opinion, you're not trying to beat everyone else. You're trying to learn. Because when you learn and you gain all this information, you become a better delegate. And that is ultimately what's going to help you win. A lot of people are so dedicated, are very dedicated. They are very dedicated, but they're so determined to win that they're just going to go straight forward toward their goal, and they're not going to learn. Learn. That's probably the most important thing you can do coming into an early Model UN conference. And then when you identify a mistake, just spend time fixing it. In high school, another time, this was not a Model UN conference, but it was the first time I ran into a formal debate with rules of procedure, parliamentary procedure. I had never met someone who knew what parliamentary procedure was. So it was very, very, very hard for me to participate. So that night, I studied really hard, and the next day, I knew a lot more about parliamentary procedure, and I could run the meetings. So it's a lot about learning from your mistakes and moving forward. So with that, unless there are any more questions, I think I will close out this webinar. I hope that you've all found it useful, and that maybe just the most important thing, I think I've said that a lot tonight, but one of the most important things is just that you give yourself some credit. This is hard, but you can do it. You can be successful. You can figure out what's going on, and you might realize that Model UN is your passion, and it's where you want to focus all your interests and efforts, and it's what you want to do for the next 3, 4, 5 years. Or you might realize that you didn't really like it, but you learned a lot from it. Or you might realize that it's something that you do for fun sometimes, but you have different priorities and preferences. So just cut yourself some slack. Be good to yourself. Know that you belong there. Know that you deserve to be in the room just as much as anyone else, even as much as someone who is very experienced. Be encouraging to yourself and be gentle with yourself. And just encourage yourself. If you're nervous, tell yourself you're excited. And eventually you will be. So I hope that helps. And we look forward to seeing you all at HMN India 2016 in a very few short weeks. So have a great week, everyone. And goodbye.